I have the locked book. The only book we have that comes anywhere near the description of the book that will kill you if you open it. But it's a Catholic missal.
Well, what's kind of ominous?
No, actually, it's just a hymnal.
Look at that. Well, you want me to close this up?
I just move those down. As you can see, it has latches, which is the only thing.
So you promise if I open this book, or you open this book, we're not going to commit suicide?
Not as far as I know. It's a good example of the book art, but it's not even a particularly old book. It's from the 1890s. It was as I understand it, in a monastery in Iowa. The monastery closed, and alumni of Whitewater saw and thought the college might like it, bought it, and gave it to us.
Just for the record, I'm keeping my eyes closed when you open that. Wow.
The infamous lock book, they never give us a title, an author, a publisher, a date, anything that would identify a book. So,
Are you talking about this particular book?
The supposed locked book that will kill you if you open it. They have never given us any kind of identifying information.
Tell us what happens when people come in looking for it. What's the typical, or is there a typical? I imagine you get...
I pull it out, they sort of look at it and say, oh.
Do they come in and just say, I want to see the book?
Yes, I have had that happen.
And who is it? Who
Generally just students. A lot of times the RP, the RP tends to assign an article about it every year, so we almost always get somebody from the RP in to see it every year. I tend to show it to the archives classes when they're in here for tours. I do 3 to 5 archives related instructional sessions, and we often pull it out for them.
Because it's
a campus myth. And
so it has its own history in addition to the history that it brought to campus with it.
We think that part of the reason for the campus legends, and that's one of the things you're here to talk to me about, is that back before the renovation in 1989, this whole area out here where there are now periodicals was a storage area a locked storage area for the library. Within that locked room, which had government documents and university archive materials, a lot of it was in a small caged area, which was where we kept the university special collections. And so it was locked in a cage. Mm-hmm. And I think that's where part of the stories came, because if you wanted something out of special collections, you went to the circulation desk for the government documents librarian, somebody had to get keys out, they had to cross a hall, go over, open one door to get into the storage area, and open a third door to get into this locked area, and then of course the students couldn't come and look at it. We went in, pulled something out, relocked all the doors, and brought it over, and they used it in the reading room for government documents. I think that's where a lot of it came from. And of course, there was the time they did find a casket on the University Mall. I wasn't here then. That had been dug up, I think, from Calvary Cemetery, I believe I was told. And yes, the 3 cemeteries do make an isosceles triangle, but I don't think the Catholics were talking to the Congregationalists when they built their cemetery. And Oak Grove is older than the other 2 to begin with. The original cemetery in Whitewater is actually underneath where the Congregational Church now is. When the Congregationalists decided to build that church, they moved the graves there over to what is now Oak Grove. Oak Grove was used for burials for a long time. It isn't really anymore. Our Revolutionary War veterans are there. Mm-hmm. I think both of our War of 1812 veterans may also be there. I'd have to check on that.
What about, it's supposed to be witches buried there? Rumors? Is there any...
That's a rumor. Supposedly the witches were up around the Stair and Water Tower is where they usually met. My guess is they were probably KKK members. I mean, in the dark, the cloaks would look similar. We know Whitewater had a strong KKK chapter back in the 1920s. The county president of the KKK was found dead on the lawn of the Methodist Church back sometime in the 20s. I could look it up for you, but I don't know the date off the top of my head. So I personally think that's where some of the witch things came from, was members, people running around in their cloaks from that. There may have been other, social groups that wore robes for their meetings. I've been here almost 30 years. I've never met anybody who was, other than the campus, the communities itself, well, they're now starting to use it as a publicity thing. Mm-hmm. In fact, if you talk to the Chamber of Commerce, they had a big spirit tour last week.
We were there.
Oh, you were? Okay. And of course, the spiritual school was here. Spiritualism was a religious movement in the 19th century. It had nothing to do with witches. It did have something to do with ghosts, apparently, medium spirit talking. But the people who settled this part of Wisconsin were from the area in upstate New York where a lot of religious fervor was going on. The spiritualists were a very powerful group. At the same time, the Mormons were starting. The millenarians, a number of other groups you never hear about now. The Shakers come out of that same general area. The temperance movement comes out of that area. Women's rights comes out of that area. Anti-slavery was very strong there. And all of those people came here to Wisconsin, so it's not surprising they brought the spiritualism with them. Morris Pratt was a spiritualist. He was also a cousin of one of the founders of Whitewater. He himself was more over toward Milton, but, he was a committed spiritualist. He said that, if the spirits helped him make this major business investment up in the UP, he would build a school for spiritualism, which apparently also was his home. So, he hit it big up on the UP. I don't remember whether it was copper or iron, but, a major mineral investment up there. Came back here and built his school. And when he died, it went to the spiritual society. It was here until the 30s when they sort of ran out of money, well, with a lot of other groups in the Depression. There still is a Morris Pratt Institute in Milwaukee, which feels that it is directly connected to the school here. The school here was was used as a college dorm in the 40s, before we had any on campus. And was torn down sometime in the 60s to make way for a telephone building. And there's a picture of it out in the main room.
Yeah, I saw that coming in. Back to the witches book. Where do you think the legend of anybody that read it would commit suicide or had committed suicide?
I don't know. That was in force before I ever became archivist, so I don't know where that part of it's coming from.
Any thoughts on that?
I just think it's silly. I mean, this is an old New England town in many ways. This is not the kind of thing your average New England stern Congregationalist or Presbyterian is going to give any credence to whatsoever. This was an anti-slavery town. This was a temperance town. It was a suffrage area. We have some evidence that the suffrage movement was very well supported in Whitewater quite early. We may have been a stop on the Underground Railroad. We have no evidence, but certainly Milton was. The people who settled here would not have tolerated, witchcraft. It just would not have settled here.
They had a hard time with just the spiritualist school, didn't they?
A lot of them
there
did,
was a lot of upheaval in town, I know, when he chose this as the cornerstone for it. You don't collect history, but you're the caretaker for it.
I collect it too.
You do?
Collect local history, yes.
Well, you sound like you have a passion for it, definitely.
I have 2 degrees in history. I have an undergraduate degree in, basically we called it an Atlantic major, but primarily American history. And that was from Mount Holyoke College where I did my undergraduate work. And then I have a master's degree in history from American history from Madison.
So when you are locking up at night or when you're looking through the shelves, what's going through your mind is history. What's going through your mind is legacy. What's going through your mind is not legends and lore and superstition and student. Do you understand, though, how this is so appealing to kids? And how do you feel about that
I'm more of a
personally?
my personal area when I'm looking at the stacks is genealogy. I've been doing family history for more than 40 years. A lot of the patrons I help are genealogists who are looking for their families. So I know a lot about the families in the Whitewater area because I've been helping those people since I've been archivist, which is 20 years.
20 years. Can you tell me, in terms of those 20 years, have the kids who have come in, or the general public who's come in looking for information on Morris Pratt or on the superstitions and legends, have you seen the legends build and ebb
a little bit?
Have they changed over the years at all?
No, it's pretty much the same superstitions we had.
Okay.
The university, my predecessor, or not my predecessor directly, but the head of reference when I came, had started a file of articles and things that were talking about the spiritualists. So spiritualists, haunted Whitewater. This has been a question that's been coming to the reference desk, I think, at least back into the 50s.
Okay.
So the reference department knows it's coming every year. If we see something, we clip it. If we see something on the web, we've marked that, made a note of that. I think there's been more recently because of that haunted Whitewater movie they were going to make a couple of years, Witches of Whitewater.
What happened to that? Do you know why that high production? And I couldn't ever find out what happened. I mean, it looks like they did a lot of filming, but anyway.
Yeah, and in a place that doesn't look anything at all like Whitewater, since there's mountains in the picture.
So what? Do you believe any of this? Do you believe in the
No.
witch's book or the witch? I mean, do you think it's all?
let's put it this way. I am not close to the idea of there being ghosts in particular. The spirituals certainly believed in them. You know, I live in a house that's 150 years old. There are no noises in the night that I don't know what's causing them. I'm not going to go investigate them. Put it this way, I have never spoken to somebody who has been a resident of Whitewater for more than 10 years who even gives any of this any credence at all. I'm good friends with Carol Cartwright, who's the museum curator at the local museum, who did this, talked about Morris Pratt and things at the spiritual tour. Carol's never really heard anything. We think it's a lot of stuff that just goes back to the spiritual schools, the Underground Railroad, and the Ku Klux Klan.
Kind of the perfect storm.
Yeah.
And also people dip in and...
People dip in and pull things out. It's like, I guess they did something with Mary Worth at this tour. I have been through every census record for Whitewater for the appropriate period. There is no Mary Worth in any census record. We don't know where this is coming from.
But there's a legend about Mary
Yes.
Worth, and can you tell us a little bit about that?
I really don't know much about
Okay.
it. All the fact that I guess she was supposed to have been a murderer.
Okay.
And supposedly there's a gravestone up in Calvary Cemetery, which, you know, if she was not in the census. She was brought from somewhere else and buried there. If there's a Mary Worth in that cemetery, and I think I can show you the cemetery list. I don't think there is one even in the cemetery list. So
Well, you would know.
got it out of the desk. You want to look at it?
You said there's a file that you keep. It's mainly on the Pratt Institute, but you also have, you kind of just use it as a catch-all.
Yeah, we use it for all the haunted Whitewater stuff. Last year, or actually 3 years ago now, we did a haunted book panel. We had Linda Godfrey come, who's written a number of things on haunted Wisconsin. And there are plenty of people who write about haunted Wisconsin. We must have 5 or 6 books in the special collections on that topic. And they're down here because they'd get stolen if they were upstairs.
Really? Makes sense.
We had Linda here last week shooting.
Okay.
Because she went to school here,
Yeah,
she's got a history.
She did a lot of her research here.
Yes.
She told us a story about being in Wells.
Okay.
She lived in Wells, and my daughter goes here now, and she said that that the kids talk about Wells being haunted. And I mean, I think every university
As an archivist, as a faculty member, I'm not in the dorms. I don't know what's going on in the dorms.
Right.
I only hear the students come in and bring me. And we had a student do a video a couple of years ago about haunting in Whitewater, which was quite well done. I don't know if I think it's on YouTube somewhere.
Oh, we'll have to take it.
Yeah, right. We'll see.
Did the kids come in and say?
Underground Railroad, or the underground tunnels that are in Whitewater?
There are, in some of the older homes, particularly some of the old Cream City brick homes, like the Hamilton House and the house, I think it's the Dora Under Bricks, and some of the older homes in Whitewater have bricked-in cellars. And it's possible that they were used. They're old. Some of them are old enough to have been used by the Underground Railroad. We have no evidence in Whitewater. You know, I'd have a lot more belief in this haunted book, which of course they say we aren't giving them the right book anyway. If they had an author or a title or a publisher or something, a date.
So if they came in with more specific information,
We'd certainly look and see if we ever had a book by that information. But with what we're given, most of the librarians say, oh, they're just being weird again. The reason for the campus legends, and that's one of the things you're here to talk to me about, is that back before the renovation in 1989, this whole area out here where there are enough periodicals was a storage area a locked storage area for the library. Within that locked room, which had government documents and university archive materials, a lot of it was in a small caged area, which was where we kept the university special collections. And so it was locked in a cage. Mm-hmm. And I think that's where part of these stories came, because you had... I have the locked book. The only book we have that comes anywhere near the description of the book that will kill you if you open it. But it's a Catholic missal.
Well, what's kind of ominous?
No, actually it's just a hymnal.
look at that. You want me to close this up?
I just move those down. As you can see, it has latches, which is the only thing. The infamous lock book, they never give us a title, an author, a publisher, a date, anything that would identify a book. So, you know,
Are you talking about this particular book?
the supposed lock book that will kill you if you open
Well-
it. They have never given us any kind of identifying information.
Tell us what happens when people come in looking for it. What's the typical, or is there a typical? I imagine you get,
I pull it out, they sort of look at it and say, oh,
do they come in and just say, I want to see the book?
yes, I have had that happen.
So you promise if I open this book, or you open this book, we're not going to commit suicide?
Not as far as I know. It's a good example of the book art, but it's not even a particularly old book. It's from the 1890s. It was in a, as I understand it, in a monastery in Iowa. The monastery closed, and alumni of Whitewater saw and thought the college might like it, bought it, and gave it to us.
Just for the record, I'm keeping my eyes closed when you open that. Wow.
And who is it? Who would
Generally
know?
just students. A lot of times the RP, the RP tends to assign an article about it every year, so we almost always get somebody from the RP in to see it every year. I tend to show it to the archives classes when they're in here for tours. I do 3 to 5 archives related instructional sessions, and we often pull it out for them
Because it's,
it's a campus myth. And
so it has its own history in addition to the history that it brought to campus with it.
we think that part